Here. Good evening. This is Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor. It is Tuesday, and it is June 15th, the middle of June. Welcome, everyone, to our chat with two rabbis. I'm very pleased to welcome Rabbi Barry Silver and our guest, Rabbi Zvi Kahn. We're thrilled to have both of you tonight for another interesting discussion about Torah and more. And take it away, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon, for organizing this wonderful discussion. Thank you, everyone else, for being here and participating. We appreciate it. And thank you, Rabbi Kahn. Rabbi Kahn has been offered a job. He's going to be very busy. So we're not sure how long these sessions will go on. So if you have any questions that you've always wanted to ask an Orthodox rabbi, but we're afraid to ask, I don't want you to think that this is just going to go on forever and you think, well, I'll ask sometime next year, or I'm a little embarrassed now, I'll wait. Ask now or forever hold your peace. I'm sure that whatever life holds for Rabbi Kahn, we'll keep in touch and we'll have continuing discussions, but it might not be on a weekly basis, and you might not have the chance to just ask any question you feel like anytime. So I encourage you to do that. He has a wealth of knowledge. His background is different than mine, might not be different than yours. I suspect a lot of people here were raised under a conservative or Orthodox background, but he has a lot of information to share. As we usually do, I asked Rabbi Kahn to share a few words about the Torah passage, Chukkat, this week, and then we'll talk about what's going on in the world. And last time, Rabbi Kahn, you missed out on some fireworks. I think there was some serious disagreements. I don't know if it was on this episode or something, but people were getting all excited and flustered, and so maybe the same thing will happen here. I always like that. I like when people get very emotional about things and their views are challenged. I think that's very healthy. And so I will turn it over to you, Rabbi Kahn, and share some thoughts with us, please, about the Torah passage this week.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. I apologize for missing last week. It is true that the sessions that I'm going to be able to attend might be limited. For sure, I let Rabbi Silver know that I would do the next two tonight and the next two sessions in June. Once we get to July and August, my wife and I, thank God, have a lot going on. Our son, who lives in Israel, just got engaged, and we hope to be. Thank you. Mazel tov to everybody, and we hope to travel to Israel for the wedding, and we hope to spend some time there and celebrating with family there. So I'll also be preparing, as Rabbi Silver mentioned, for a new job next year that starts in August. And so a lot going on, and unfortunately I won't be able to, it'll be hard for me to do the sessions over the summer, but I might be able to come back next year once I kind of settle in at the new job, and we'll have to see how that plays out. But the main thing I want to say is that I guess two things. One is, I for sure want to stay connected to you guys and to the L'Dor Va-Dor folks, and whether, even if I can't do the weekly sessions, there might be other ways that we can think of for me to stay involved and participate. I missed the food drive this past year, so I'm committed to make the food drive, if nothing else, this coming year, God willing, at the very least, but hopefully I can also participate in some other things. And also, Sharon and Rabbi Silver have my email and my phone number, which I would ask them to make available to everyone. So if a question ever does come up, you don't have to forever hold your peace. You can always reach me and contact me, and I'll be happy to discuss anything with anybody at any time. In terms of this week's Torah portion, it's called Chukkat, and it has some very, very unusual laws and incidents that happen. I'll just quickly touch upon two of them. The Torah portion begins with a ritual that was performed when a person had come in contact with a dead body. And we've mentioned previously that according to Torah law, at the time when the temples stood, you had to be ritually pure in order to bring an offering or to enter the temple grounds. And so in order to be ritually pure, one of the things you had to do was not come in contact with the dead body, which would make you ritually impure. However, if a person became ritually impure, there was a ceremony or a ritual they could undergo, and that's actually described here in our Torah portion this week. It involved the ashes of a red heifer, a cow that was colored red hair, like a red-haired cow. I once saw an orange-haired cow, but I don't know if I've ever seen a fully red-haired cow. But that's what they use for this ritual. And what's very fascinating to me about the ritual that I just want to comment on is that the Torah says the people who performed the ritual to help the impure person become pure, they themselves then became impure. So think about that for a moment. You have people who are ritually pure. They arrange a ceremony and a ritual for a person who has come in contact with a dead body who is ritually impure and needs their help and needs their assistance. At the end of the ceremony, the impure person is now ritually pure, and the people who assisted him become ritually impure. So there's a lot of discussion and thought about what in the world, why does that happen? What does that mean? What is the symbolism or meaning of that? It's considered one of the mysteries of the Torah. The Talmud even says that the great King Solomon, who was considered one of the wisest human beings who ever lived, had a hard time figuring this particular dynamic or this particular phenomenon out. But I do think there's something very relevant for all of us to think about in modern times and modern life, even though the ritual is not something that has been performed for 2,000 years. But the idea that when we make a commitment, when we decide to help someone with an extreme kind of problem, and this was viewed at that time as an extreme kind of problem, we have to be open to the possibility that we ourselves might be impacted in ways that are negative, in ways that might be hard to rectify afterwards. And you know, I think every person in life can think about maybe certain types of situations where you actually have to ask yourself, I want to help this person, but if I get too involved or too deeply involved, is that going to ultimately, am I going to be able to extract myself? Am I going to be able to be okay afterwards? Or is it possible that I might have to step away and not get involved because of the outcome or ramifications that could be negative for me or my family if I get too involved in a difficult situation? Of course, the Torah is not trying to tell us not to help people, but what the Torah is saying is that when you do help people in certain kinds of situations, you need to be aware of the fact that there might be a certain cost to you that you need to take into account. And I think, again, I can think in my own life and other situations where that has actually been the case, and it's not something we often think about. Certainly, if you think about the very tragic incidents where people jump into a lake or a river or the ocean to save someone who's drowning or in danger of drowning, and then you read in the next morning's paper that the person, the would-be saviors, have died and have drowned, and sometimes they were able to save the person and sometimes they weren't. That's kind of a tragic example of this phenomenon. We jump and rush into saving someone, but sometimes we have to think what might happen. And of course, we have to do our best, but sometimes we put ourselves in danger in situations that we can't escape from in those kinds of situations. So that's one little piece. And the other incident I would mention that I just think is so beautiful is that the Torah tells us that the Jewish people all through their journey through the wilderness had water, received water in different ways, which was of course life-saving for them. Without water, you can't survive. Certainly a trip through a hot, burning desert and wilderness for 40 years. In the merit, they received water in the merit of Miriam. Miriam was the sister of Moses and Aaron. And Miriam is a very interesting figure in her own right. I think it's a shame she gets very little attention. Of course, the Torah is full of descriptions and incidents that have to do with Moses. There's also a lot of information about Aaron, but there's not that much information about Miriam. And here in this week's Torah portion, the Torah takes the time to tell us that that the water that they received throughout their journeys came to them from God, and sometimes in openly miraculous ways, in the merit of Miriam. And when Miriam died, which happens, which is narrated in this week's Torah portion, the water ceased. They stopped receiving the water, and they had to have special prayers and special, do special things to be able to regain the privilege of receiving water. And I would just point out something, that when different rebellions came up during the time in the wilderness, there was never an issue of rebelling or any anger or any rancor or anything negative about Miriam. There were rebellions against Moses. There were complaints against Moses and against Aaron. But that never happened with Miriam. And that's why I think the water is so symbolic, right? And water, it's so pure. It's such an act of kindness to give water to a person who's thirsty in the desert and the wilderness. And that's what Miriam represented: pure kindness, pure giving. And any time there was a problem with the leadership, it was directed at Moses and Aaron. And I'm not saying it should have been, I'm just saying that's the fact it was, but there was never any problems directed at Miriam, because she was seen by the people. She was appreciated and cherished by the people as someone who was a fountain, so to speak, a fountain of kindness, a fountain of giving, and they received their water in her merit, which is a beautiful tribute for the Torah to pay to her, I believe. At the time of her death, we learn about this here in this week's Torah portion.
Well, Rabbi, you gave a very wonderful rendition of the Torah passage, and it's very interesting that you and I read the same passage and we can focus or think about different things that it brings up. With me, as someone who is a vegetarian, I look at this passage and I think, glad we're not living in those days where it says that Eleazar the priest, after they slaughter this innocent animal, I'm reading from it now, he dips his finger into the blood and the entrails, and he does all these weird rituals, and they do some disgusting things to the animal after it's been butchered, and crazy things, like really bizarre. Like you say, people had trouble figuring out what's going on here, like why would they do that? And some of the rabbis, some of the traditional rabbis said, oh, of course it doesn't make any sense. That's what God planned. God wanted to see how blindly the people would follow him, to see if, even if he gives them some ritual that's completely bizarre and makes no sense, will they do it anyway? Even though there's no rationale for it. Like some of the rules that they have, you could try to figure out, well, maybe God did this for health reasons, or maybe there's some reason. But this one, the rabbis concluded there could possibly be no rational reason for it. The only way you could possibly follow this is if you just blindly follow. Do the people have this blind loyalty to God, or would somebody question it? And so from my way of thinking, that's not a good test. Jewish people, I think, pass the test when they rebel against such things. And there's many stories in the Torah where the Jews do rebel against authority, including God's authority, when it doesn't really make sense. This to me is kind of retrograde. There's other things in the passage that are interesting also. Rabbi Kahn mentioned that there was no water, and this is a perennial problem in the desert. And so the people are complaining to Moses. Now, usually Moses has a great disposition. I mean, they're complaining and arguing, and he's doing all these great things, and he doesn't get upset. He's very calm and mild-mannered. Not this time. This time he gets mad, and they're saying, we want water, we want water. So Moses is like really getting mad and says, okay, you rebels, you want water? Fine, I'll get you water. And God had told Moses what to do. He said, speak to the rock, and you get water. But Moses was so angry and flustered and perturbed that he apparently forgot what God said. God said, speak to the rock. So instead, he gets so mad, he hits the rock and he says, okay, are you satisfied now? And then water comes out. And then God, who judges Moses very harshly compared to everybody else, says, because you did that, you're not getting into the promised land. I told you to talk to the rock and you hit the rock. You gave the impression that you didn't have confidence in me. You thought it was necessary to hit the rock, so you're not getting in. So it's kind of a sad story with a very harsh decree. That's all in Chukkat. So you might say, well, Rabbi, if you don't think much of this crazy ritual, why bother reading the passage and why bother studying it all? It's all a waste of time, isn't it? Well, I think if you take it literally, it has some issues. But if we try to learn from the morals of it, not in a literal sense, but what can we derive from this? Here's what I derive. The Torah is trying to tell us to sacrifice all of our sacred cows. Any sacred cows that we have, ideas or beliefs that we hold irrationally, and we're not able to subject them to the light of reason, get rid of them, sacrifice them, and then you can move on. We have a lot of sacred cows. In our nation, we have a lot of beliefs that hold us back. In Judaism, we have a lot of clutter from the past. But most of all, every one of us, if you were to look inside of our minds, you would see a lot of useless, harmful ideas that we picked up from the past. Our parents might have taught us things, or maybe as kids, we went through difficult times and we have a bad self-impression, or maybe we've picked up some discouragement from along the way. If we could get rid of all these sacred cows and clear out all the clutter, like we're supposed to do on Passover with the chametz, imagine what we could accomplish if we were free of all these crazy ideas. So I think the passage has a lot to teach us if we read it in this light. And that's what I'll be sharing on Shabbat. Getting rid of our sacred cows politically, religiously, personally, and allowing us to then achieve our full potential. Rabbi Kahn, I turn it back to you for what we call in legal circles, sur-rebuttal. That's when you speak, I give the rebuttal, you give the sur-rebuttal, you then challenge what I said. I have to tell you this before we get to Emily. I have to tell you, before we had this session, Rabbi Kahn always graciously calls me up. He reminds me, he knows I'm a little absent-minded. Remember, we got this discussion at 7 o'clock. What is it that you'd like to talk about? And then I share some ideas, and I told him, you know, Rabbi Kahn, there's got to be some things that I'm saying that you don't agree with. There's got to be some things that you want to challenge me on. I don't know how many sessions we have left, so hit me with your best shot. Come on, let's go for it, and let's have some interesting discussion. So he said, well, now you know what's coming. It's not going to be a surprise. So I told him, I don't know what you're going to come up with. So I invite not just Rabbi Kahn, but I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of things I say are just a little bit controversial. So I want you to challenge what I'm saying. If there's something you disagree with, I can handle it. I've been through worse. So anything you disagree with or agree with, let us know. Emily, it's all yours.
Wait a minute, unmute yourself, Em.
Rabbi Kahn, is there any reason that Miriam's name and Mayim, the word for water, are so similar?
Very good.
That's such a tremendous insight and connection to make. As a matter of fact, there's only a one-letter difference, the letter Resh. And Miriam, if you take out that one letter, you have exactly. The mem, the yud, and the mem, and Mayim. And I want to tell you, and this might seem really strange, but I never noticed it until you just said it, Emily. So thank you very much. That's a beautiful, beautiful insight. I don't know how many years I've been aware since I was much younger that the water, the Mayim, came in the merit of Miriam. And I never thought to look at the two words and notice what you just noticed. So that's really illustrates perfectly why I love being part of the group, because I years and years of reviewing this Torah portion, I never saw that connection. I really didn't. I never saw it. I think it's fantastic. I can't wait to share it with other people. Thank you.
That is amazing.
I do want to tell you, while I have this opportunity, my daughter from Boston was in last fall and listened to you, Rabbi Kahn, and she absolutely is in love with you. So just saying.
I remember when she came on, but that's such a great insight. Miriam and Mayim, I can't believe I missed it. So thank you, Emily. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really owe you a great debt of gratitude for that. For sharing.
Well, you know, Rabbi, I'm also surprised because I'm always looking for these word plays and connections.
Yes.
I never noticed it either. Never noticed Miriam and Mayim. That's genius. And I don't know. I suspect that the Talmudic scholars didn't either, because if they did, Rabbi Kahn would know about it. But I just want to share one other thing, because I like to take it one step further. The resh that's in Miriam probably could stand for ruach. So she had the ruach, the spirit that allowed the water to be made manifest, or the spirituality. So that's an amazing insight. I'm going to share that too. And now and Rabbi Kahn will also. So that's a really great observation that you made about Miriam, because she's totally associated with the water. There's even, isn't there a cup of water on Passover? Miriam's cup that they have on Passover. So that's very good. All right.
So there's a ratio of a difference. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So what else? Anything else about the passage that you know? The other thing is, Rabbi Kahn, we talked about this before. After going through all these bizarre things, it says this is an eternal covenant. You got to do this forever. And you're going to say, well, we don't have to do it forever because I guess what, the temple's not around anymore or something like that, right?
Yep.
That covers it all. Okay. Let's talk about what's going on in the world. You know, what's going on in Israel is really quite amazing. I mean, the new government, Netanyahu, is no longer with us. We have an Arab political party in the government. So, Rabbi Kahn, what do you think about that? About bringing in an Arab party alongside a very right-wing party? What do you think about that? Are you nervous?
I think that sometimes there are things that happen, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in the world in general, whether it's in our personal lives, that really are remarkable and unprecedented. And you have to really take a step back and try and think about them. And at the very least, realize that something that is happening has never happened before. And not only that, that was completely unpredictable. You know, forget about a year ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago, just a month ago, no one in Israel or in the Jewish world would have predicted that a government like the one that came together and coalesced and successfully established themselves as the new administration in Israel, no one would have thought it possible. And that's not just because of the Arab party, which is certainly completely unprecedented, that an Arab political party would be invited, and agree to accept the invitation and serve as part of the administration that runs the country, is completely unheard of and has never happened before, and is amazing. And then when you combine that with the fact that the prime minister is from an extremely right-wing party, which usually takes a position that we want as little to do with the Arabs and the Palestinians as possible, and we don't trust them, and we aren't really comfortable with them necessarily having any political power, and they're agreeing to serve in a government with this Arab party in the arena. And then you look at the other parties. I believe there are 8 different small political parties that have come together and joined together to form this new majority in this new administration. And they all have very, very different agendas, very different histories and backgrounds, and very different ideologies. So it's very strange, very, very strange that this is happening. And it could, God willing, it'll turn out to be strangely wonderful, strangely amazing, strangely successful, and it'll bring good for Israel and all its citizens and the Jewish people. You know, there are lots of people who are betting against the longevity of this government and are saying they'll be lucky to last a month or two. But others are saying that, listen, these guys are obviously very creative and very open-minded, and they're willing to do what they've done so far, which no one could believe. And so they might actually keep it together and accomplish some great things. In terms of, you know, my own feelings, I don't know how to feel because I have no idea what they want to do and what they are planning to do and what they'll possibly be successful in doing. Does it make me nervous to have this particular Arab party as part of the government? Yes, it does. Sometimes Arab political parties in Israel have been very anti-Zionist, even though they've been in the government. And they certainly have made some very harsh and controversial statements at times. So it does make me nervous. But the fact that they agreed to serve in the administration might mean that they want to open a new page, that they want to turn the chapter and open a new chapter in Israeli history. And in a way, what could be more amazing than that? But who knows how it'll turn out? Who knows if it'll last? Who knows if they'll stay together? And who knows what they'll be able to accomplish? But we always have to hope for the best and hope for the good.
You know, I share your optimism, and also it is amazing that these two parties came together. The only thing I can figure is their dislike for Netanyahu transcended their dislike for each other. So there was really seemed to be a lot of sentiment to replace him because they thought that he was not helping Israel and he had served too long. So that's what it ended. Also, the ZOA doesn't care for this coalition. They don't like hiring Arabs, or this particular party. I guess any party probably, but this particular party they don't like, because the party apparently has gone on record as saying some really bad things about Israel. So they are not pleased. I do share your optimism. I'm hopeful that they will now modify their position once they have a seat at the table. And I think it's a good thing. I do want to ask you something else, and then I'd be interested in getting the opinion of other people. I read something, and I'm embarrassed now. I can't remember exactly who said it. I think it was Lapid, I think. He was like condemning Netanyahu and the right wing for heckling the speakers at the coalition on the inauguration, and not only heckling them, saying we're not going anywhere, coming back, and what he said was, his speech was very eloquent. He said, my mother was there, and I was so embarrassed because I wanted her to see in the Knesset the Israeli government, democracy in action. And what she saw was people who have no respect for democracy and no respect for Israel, people who don't recognize Jewish unity. And that's our strength, and how embarrassing it is. And he didn't even deliver his speech that he wanted to deliver. He just, did you hear about that? And what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I did hear about it. I thought it was very sad. Unfortunately, the Knesset is not immune, and I would, to those kinds of scenes of heckling, screaming, people coming up, people not being able to just sit in their seat and listen to speeches. But Israel, the truth is, it's a somewhat of a reflection of Israeli society. Israel is a very passionate place. People hold their views and opinions as if every opinion is a life and death issue sometimes, and they're not always able to kind of just sit back and relax and say, you know, live and let live. I have my opinion, the other person has his or her opinion. The Knesset can be a very raucous, wild west type of environment sometimes, and that's exactly what happened when the new administration that Lapid is a part of, and really I think Lapid played the key role in bringing all these other groups together and allowing Bennett to come in and be the first prime minister before Lapid himself will serve in 2 years. So he's really, I think, the key man behind all of this. But I was sad. It was very sad for him to get up and say, I'm not even going to try and offer my speech. My elderly mother is here in the audience, and the last thing I want to do is start speaking and have the same thing occur with the heckling and the screaming and the yelling and people kind of coming up and almost attacking the speaker. I don't want her to see that, but it's an embarrassing moment for me and for my mother and for really for the people of Israel. I wish I could say that never ever happens and it was unprecedented, but I've read about lots of different incidents where that does take place, and it's sad that it happened. I do think this will be a tremendous test for Netanyahu and for the Likud and other right-wing parties, because no matter how certain they are that only their way is the right way for Israel and the secured way to bring security and maintain Israel's security. And I know for a fact they feel that way, but no matter how strongly they feel that way, the whole definition and point of democracy is that if you lose the election and another party gets in, you step aside and you let them, you're the loyal opposition. You might have your own views and oppose their views, but you're the loyal opposition. You hope for success. You
Rabbi Kahn, did it remind you of a similar transition of power anywhere else in the world? And do you think that perhaps they were influenced in Israel by their close ally here? Do you think that had any influence? And I have to excuse myself for a moment. Nudnik is really anxious to get out because Francine just walked in and she's barking and the door's closed and I feel horrible. So I gotta liberate her and I'll be back in an instant. But I'd love for you to answer that question.
Sure. First of all, I love the name Nudnik for a dog. That's great. That's awesome. I don't know why I never thought of that for one of our pets. But we have a Mazik. My parents have a dog named Mazik, which means like a mischievous demon or devil. But we don't have a Nudnik. Listen, I think the comparison. I really think, thank God, we don't have to make the comparison, because what happened here, of course, in the United States, is that people literally attacked the Congress building to take it over and to possibly actually physically harm and attack the people there, the representatives and the senators who were going to who were trying to do something that they disagreed with. And in Israel, that didn't happen. Nobody came to take over the Knesset. Nobody, the people who made the scene were Knesset members. And it's true, it was an embarrassing scene, and it showed a lot of rudeness and chutzpah. But it's really a far cry. I think it's a far cry from what happened in our country, and God willing, we'll never ever see anything like that again in America or in Israel. That's really where people are in danger, and our very democracy is in danger. So I would shy away from making the comparison.
Well, I don't know if God's willing, but there's a lot of other people who are very willing to try it again. It seems like they haven't learned anything, and they're amassing their forces to try again next time. And I agree with you. What happened in Israel was nothing compared to what happened here, but it's the same issue. It's people happen to be on the right wing who happen to be so convinced that they're right and so convinced that it's going to be a disaster without them that they refuse to go gracefully and to work together as a team and say, okay, we're going to work with you. We lost the election. We'll work with you. Let's make this happen. Instead, it's like, you guys are the devil and we're going to do everything we can to destroy you. It's the same mentality, but you're right. It's not nearly as serious. What happened here was deadly serious and could have actually caused the democracy that we had to come to an end. And the threat isn't over. So we need to be very vigilant. Is there anyone else who wants to comment about anything so far? Anything we've said, or this, or the Torah reading, or anything else? I see, looks like Wendy Frank has her hand up.
Unmute yourself, Wendy.
In terms of what what Rabbi Kahn just said.
Uh-oh.
All right, I don't know why you're getting that. Let me move further back. Is it better now?
Yes,
Okay.
you're okay.
In terms of what Rabbi Kahn just said, that he doesn't think it's similar. I don't know if Barry heard it all because he was letting Nudnik out. Because Israel didn't do anything like the insurrection. The insurrection didn't happen for more than 2 months after the election. This election was just, what, a week ago? The Israeli election in the last week and a half?
Yeah.
So, we don't really know yet fully what people will do. And after we are done with this topic, the question that I wanted to ask Rabbi Kahn, which must have been brought up before, is what can be done by people who are not the Zionists in Israel to help those extremists who have so much control and make the rest of us look so bad. For example, when they had that on Lag BaOmer, when 10,000 of them got together without masks to pray, and then there was the stampede, and I don't know if it was 15 or 20 that got killed and 150 got injured. The whole way they look at things, who could possibly influence that when we're done with all this? So if people can keep that in the back of their minds. Thank you.
Rabbi Kahn, you want to try to provide a response to that, or maybe it's a rhetorical question? I don't know. Go ahead.
No. Wendy, that's a very good question, and I'm pleased to say that I've read about efforts already in place to have government agencies supervise that particular day of Lag BaOmer next year in that location, and things that would do what they should have done, asserted themselves as they should have, even though sometimes it takes a lot of political clout to be able to do it, but to assert themselves and to apply the health, let the health ministry and let all the different groups make sure that it's a safe environment and that things are handled the way they should handle to prevent such a terrible tragedy from happening again. I think that every country, certainly Israel very much included, but I think that every country, or many countries, certainly the United States not excluded, has groups and communities that don't take certain types of ideas that the community at large takes seriously, don't take them seriously. And sometimes that's okay and it can work for everybody, but sometimes it can be dangerous to the group, or it can be dangerous to other people other people's as well. And in Israel, where you have so many different communities, don't forget that Israel has not only all different kinds of Jewish communities with their own different ideologies, but they have several different non-Jewish communities. You have the Muslim community with its different groups. You have the Christian community with its different groups. Then you have people who have immigrated and become citizens from other countries, and they have their own ideologies and their own backgrounds and histories and ideas. And Israel tries, just like the United States does, to kind of put a blanket over all of that and say, let's have a common set of values that we can all agree to that's for everyone's good. But not everybody embraces that, and not everybody buys into that. And each group tends to like to have its own special things where it says, leave us alone, this is what we do. And I think the ultra-Orthodox community that was the main community behind the Lag BaOmer event is certainly very insular and very much feels like all during the year, we generally don't have these big public celebrations. This is our one big day per year to do something like this. And people come from all over the country and even all over the world. Let us do our thing. Let us have our moment in the sun. But unfortunately, they themselves saw that had tragic consequences by ignoring the normal rules and the normal health ministry guidelines and policies. It had terribly tragic consequences. And I think the death toll was even higher. I think about 44 or 45 people died, and probably hundreds were injured, and some very seriously. So, but what I do want to say to you, Wendy, is that there are already a lot of efforts being made behind the scenes within the ultra-Orthodox community and from the government to say, let's never let this happen again. Let's make sure we take the appropriate steps, and hopefully, God willing, that's what will occur.
Rabbi Kahn, I hate to be a thorn in your side, but since I have you here, I have to bring up what to me seems rather obvious. It's not just Lag BaOmer. It's that if you have a group of people and you say, well, there's groups in Israel that maybe have a different way of looking at it. It's the right wing, you say ultra-Orthodox, but if you believe that God talks to you and you believe that you know God's will, of course you're going to place God's will over the government. If the government says do this and God's telling you do that, who are you going to listen to? So you have a group of people who hold themselves above the law, who think that they actually know what God wants them to do. And whenever God is speaking to them, it's always something irrational. So it's not just Lag Bomer. It's recently we saw right-wing groups acting like murderous thugs, going into Palestinian neighborhoods, hauling people out of their cars and beating them up and assaulting them, which was horrible. In fact, it was the same thing that Palestinian thugs were doing to Jews, except now we sunk down to their level because there's people saying, well, this is what God wants us to do. If you look at the Torah, we were told to get rid of all these people. They don't belong here. And then you have the same right-wing groups who think God's talking to them, who assassinated Rabin, murdered Arabs praying peacefully in a mosque, and do despicable things against the Palestinians. So I'm gonna repeat Wendy's question, but broaden it, because this is part of your group, but they're obviously the more extreme. But is there something you as an Orthodox rabbi can do to rein in some of these other people and say, well, you know, maybe God's not talking to you, or maybe you misunderstood, or maybe you should bring yourself within the confines of the law, or maybe you should be a little more peaceful towards the Palestinians, or I don't know, is there anything you can do? Because obviously they're not going to listen to me, they're not going to listen to the government, and they're probably going to not listen to reason or rational thought, but maybe they'd listen to another Orthodox rabbi. So I'll ask you, is there something you could do to try to rein these people in? Because they are very dangerous.
So one thing I think that's important to start with, the realization that's important to start with, is that there are different groups and ideologies that kind of often get lumped together, but really are very separate and have separate goals and separate backgrounds and separate views. The ultra-Orthodox Jews that were, let's say, when I use that term, I mean Jews that are Hasidic, and Jews that usually you would see in the black and the white and the black hats and everything like that, are usually not right-wing politically. They're very conservative, small c, religiously, and they're might be very what we would call extreme in their religious views, but they are not the people who would take Arabs out of cars and beat them up. They're actually usually very, in general, very nonviolent, but they have very passionate religious views. On the other hand,
Rabbi Kahn, don't they provide the ideological foundation for it? In other words, they're not going to go out and do it. They get them all egged up, and then these other people go out and do it. Just like with the fundamentalist Christians, the preachers don't do the violence. They preach. These people are murdering babies, and then these crazy people go out and kill an abortion doctor.
No, it's not exactly like that. Well, in Israel, you have the very strong, let's say, right-wing religiously speaking, and then you have the right-wing politically speaking, and strong right-wing political fanatics or zealots are definitely very rarely, I should say, ultra-Orthodox. Sometimes they're not religious at all, but they're very strong right-wing politically. The right-wing political parties in Israel are not the ultra-Orthodox parties. The right-wing political parties, in which you could put Naftali Bennett's party, Yamina, and some of the other parties that are very, very opposed to a Palestinian state and very opposed to trying to make peace with the Palestinians and want the Israeli military to be as strong as possible, and they're very nationalistic. Those groups should not be confused with the ultra-Orthodox groups. Each group has its own passions and its own ideologies, but what they do and how they act and what they react to are usually different types of issues. In terms of what can be done to rein them in, a lot of things happen in Israel that don't receive much publicity, certainly not here in the United States or outside of Israel in general. And I'll give you an example. After the Rabin assassination, which was carried out by a person of right-wing religious views who also happened to be an Orthodox person who had a yeshiva background, after that tragedy took place, there was a tremendous effort across the Orthodox schools in Israel to look at the curriculum and the course of studies, and to look at their whole kind of milieu and figure out like, what did we do wrong if we could produce a man who assassinated Rabin? And whole new, textbooks were written and whole new things were done to try and make sure that the students in school would never view that man as a hero, the assassin, but rather as an enemy of the Jewish people. That didn't receive any press in the United States that was going on in Israel, but I remember reading a lot of articles about it from Israeli journals and educational sources about all of this effort that went on for a long time. Does that mean it'll never happen again? It doesn't. I mean, God forbid that an assassination will ever happen again. But these efforts do take place, and people do try and rein in, any acts of violence. That certainly no religious person should ever try and justify acts of violence in Israel against any innocent people, Jew, non-Jew.
Rabbi Kahn, what did, after all that intense study and investigation and soul searching, what did they come up with? Like, where did they go wrong? Because as far as I can see, the ideology that he believed that led him to do that is the same ideology right now. And it's the same thing that's leading people to go out and beat up Palestinians. So what is it that all that soul searching actually produced as far as trying to find out how did this happen? Because to me, it's obvious why it happened. It happened because they're teaching these kids that God wrote the Torah, and the Torah says get rid of the Palestinians and exterminate them. So what is it that they're doing different, or what did they learn from all this?
I think what changed is, if we're talking for a moment about the assassination, what changed was the idea of specifically teaching the students, no matter what our belief system is, it can't lead us to assassinate and to kill. And that, I think, took very firm hold and became part of the curriculum in the religious schools across the country. And again, like I said, God willing, nothing like that'll ever happen again. However, Israel is a very, you have to realize, and Rabbi Silver, you've spoken to this, Israel lives in a very violent part of the world. And if you aren't ready to defend yourself and protect yourself at all times, you sometimes can put yourself in great danger. So when Arabs in certain cities like Ramla and Lud start burning down synagogues and apartments and burning cars and attacking Jews, no matter what anyone tells you, what any rabbi says, or what anything is taught in school, some people are going to go and do the same thing back to Arabs. That's going to happen because in their mind, it's unacceptable to allow Jews to be attacked in the Jewish state of Israel, and they're going to take action. Does that mean that that's what I would want them to do? Does that mean that any particular rabbi or head of school in Israel would want them to do that? It doesn't necessarily mean that, but we have to put things in context and realize that that's almost unavoidable. And by the way, some of the Jews who were doing that were the farthest thing from religious Jews. They were very secular Jews, but they just grow up with a feeling that's ingrained in them that if they see Arabs attacking Jews, they're going to attack the Arabs. Of course, we want to stop any kind of violence like that. But I think my basic point is that a lot of efforts are being made. But if you were to ask me, could a lot more be done? Absolutely. You still see now and feel now that there are groups that are very quick to engage in behaviors that, of course, have no place in a peaceful democratic society, and yet it happens. So we have to do whatever we can to try and stop it.
Yeah, I think Emily wants to get a word in here.
Unmute yourself, Em.
I always want to get a word in. I kind of think that the definition of the word religious has come away from what it should be. Being religious should be being loyal to a group of tenets. And if we were in a just world where we thought about the best for the human race and the earth, then we would all be loyal to saving human beings and the earth with kindness and doing good deeds. Instead, it's come to mean to be a faction and try to egotistically make our faction better than the other faction. whether it's a political party or a religion. It's the same negative spirit. And I think that's the basic thing that has to be overcome. We have to stop thinking about the party, the religion, and think more about the human race.
Well, that's very beautifully said. And since we're approaching Father's Day, I'll share with you my father's comments about that. And I also want to comment, Rabbi Kahn. I've done a lot of debates in my day because I'm a rabbi and an attorney. And I've had a lot of people that I've been with who disagree with me. And I do have to say that of everyone I've ever been with, and I've done debates for 40 years, you are by far the most eloquent and the most
thank you.
calm respondent to my effort to have a dialogue. Because there's a lot of people who think something like I do, but they're not going to ask you this. They're not going to bring it up, and they might think that way about Orthodox. They're not going to say it. I say it in order to stimulate discussion. Very, very, very few people can respond in a calm, open, friendly way to these challenges as you do. So I do compliment you. And also, not only do you do that, but you're able to defend your point of view very, very well. So I greatly respect that. And I do also now, I want to share something that from Emily that she said about being religious. So my dad explained to me, because he was a linguist, that the word religion, as I've mentioned many times, is related to the word ligament. L-I-G means to tie together, right. Like a league ties people together. So Emily's saying, I thought religion should bind us together. And instead it's separating us. Why is that? And so I agree with Emily. The original meaning of religion is to bind us together. But bind us together to what? If you believe that God wrote your Torah or your Christian scripture or your Quran, then what you're trying to do is bind yourself or link yourself together with God. Why? Because God is all powerful and you want to tap into his power. And God's going to help you to advance over all these other people. And if you tap in and connect with God, he's going to make you win and these people lose. So it's a type of thing, yes, I'm connecting, but what am I connecting with? I'm connecting with a narrow view of God in order to get a personal edge over everyone else. But if you look at religion a different way, why not, instead of linking up to this narrow view of God, why not say religion means to link up with the whole world, with all people? I want to tie myself together, not just with me personally, not even just my family, not even just my tribe, not even just people of my religion. I want to tie into all people in the world. Not only that, I want to link myself with all living things on the planet because I want to be someone who cares about all life. See, religion has to expand. Not only that, I want to link myself, not only with that, I want to link myself to the entire cosmos. I want my understanding of religion to answer the question, how do I fit in with everything, with all of creation for all time? How do I tie myself, bind myself to something greater than myself with all of that? And that's the type, I think religion needs a spiritual transformation to go from tribal to cosmic, which is what Emily's talking about. Instead of saying, I want to bind myself with my own people, it's, I want to connect with everything. And that's what we're trying to accomplish at L'Dor Va-Dor. And we're doing it one person at a time. But Emily, you capture that spirit very well on what you're saying. So I thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on this or anything else? Harris, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the only savior for Israel is a peace treaty. And I didn't know that Bennett was more right-winger than Netanyahu. So a peace treaty obviously is out of the picture. And one thing that you mentioned, Barry, was when the Israelis beat up the Palestinians. Well, those Israelis happened to be arrested, which I thought was terrific.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Let me just comment what you said, Harris, about, well, this guy's even more right-wing than Netanyahu, so forget about peace from him. Actually, If you notice, some of the people who have made peace have been the most recalcitrant, ideologue people in the world, but they were the right person to do it. Like, didn't Reagan, like, he was all of a sudden he opened up the door with China, and you had South Africa, you had people who are polar opposites and they came together. So it could be that somebody who's really right wing could do it. Why? Because nobody's going to challenge him and say, you're just an Arab lover, you don't understand. This is the guy who could actually pull it off. And he might have history in his mind thinking, if I could do this, I could really establish security for Israel. So I'm optimistic and think this guy could be totally right wing, but maybe he's also smart enough to realize this is a good opportunity.
Yeah, I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share? This has been a great discussion. And if there's anyone else who wants to jump in, go right ahead.
Oh, I just want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Horace.
Gaza sent over fire balloons into Israel today and started fires all over the place. And Israel had a retaliation. That's all I want to say.
These people are just despicable. Not only do they slaughter innocent people and just do everything they can to try to ruin the peace process, they actually have no regard for the planet whatsoever. In a world of forest burning, climate change, they're just trying to burn the place up. It's just so reckless and irresponsible.
Yes.
The people are not irredeemable. They're people just like anyone else, but their ideology needs to go. And we need to challenge that ideology because it's really despicable what they're doing.
Yeah.
Who else?
I wanted to thank both of you because I think this was a very interesting conversation. But I want to wish Mazel Tov to Rabbi Kahn, for his children's upcoming wedding, and also for his new position. Can you share with us what that position is, or at least what you're going to be doing, not necessarily where?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I had been trying very hard to find not just any job, but a job that would allow me to continue to spend some hours over at my parents' house every day, where I like to try and help out and things like that. So I found a school where they have it's a Orthodox high school, and they have their religious studies in the morning and they have their general studies in the afternoon, and they were looking for an English teacher who could come in and teach. Let's say, I think my hours are going to be something like 1 to 5, but my mornings would be open. And to me, that was a perfect opportunity. And it happens to be a long time ago, before I became a rabbi. I actually was a high school English teacher for a couple of years, and it was a great opportunity. And I interviewed, and they offered it to me, and I'm very excited about it. I had to pull out all the old boxes of novels and books, and now I'm going to do a lot of reading to prepare over the summer for the new job. But I've always loved reading and teaching kids about literature and things like that. So I'm very excited about it, and it gives me the freedom in terms of the hours to do what I feel I need to do.
Well, we're thrilled also, and I have to tell everybody here that I deserve a lot of credit for Rabbi Kahn getting that job. I don't know if you're aware of it, but when he applied, I said, I will make sure not to do anything at all to let them know that you had anything to do with me. And I made sure not to send any correspondence. I didn't call them up. I didn't do anything to hide the fact that he was associated with me. And I believe that played a large role in him getting the job. So you are indebted to me, Rabbi Kahn. And I wish you luck. I think this is a really beautiful thing, because I just see your knowledge and your talent going to waste so far. I mean, we take advantage of it, but now that you're going to be at a school, those kids are really lucky, and it's going to be a great thing. And I think your dad wanted to comment.
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure he'll be able to hear us, but I hope he can. Dad, can you hear us? Dad, can you hear us?
I think he had his hand up before. But I don't know.
I don't think so. Yeah, he doesn't.
Right.
I don't think he knows how to unmute unless your mom can come over.
All right. Anybody else want to share?
I know
something?
Valerie has something she wants to say, though. Gotta unmute yourself, Valerie, because she,
I think I've been very, very restrained this evening. I really have. First of all, congratulations, Rabbi Kahn. I am making a radical change. I'm stepping back from my ridiculously demanding job next week as well. And I really always loved senior fitness, and I'm going back full-time into the senior fitness industry in
Great.
2
Wow.
weeks. So, and I've also gotten positions with various communities doing that. So, and a lot of psychologists that I have talked to said, after the entire society basically is suffering from PTSD from this whole COVID thing. And they said part of the psychological aspect of that in a positive way is that people have a chance to reevaluate what is really a priority in their lives. And going through a situation like we have as a society have allowed many, many people, myself, yourself, and many, many others to reevaluate what is really important to them. And to bite the bullet, take the plunge, step off the cliff, if you will, and follow what it is that you really want to do. And I think that is, as a result, if there's anything that is positive that has come out of this whole experience that we have all jointly shared, I think it's the ability that we all have been able to reevaluate things and look at things from a different perspective. So to that degree, I think that it has been a very positive experience. And I thank you for helping me move in that direction. I'm not sure about Rabbi Barry. He's gotten me stirred up sometimes, but
That's my job. That's my job. And
I enjoy that too. It makes you think. It makes you think.
Valerie, I agree
Yes.
with you about COVID. It allows us to look back with 20/20 hindsight so that we can do something good in the future. And I appreciate
Absolutely.
you putting up with me, but you don't have to be restrained, Valerie. I can take it.
I know you can, and we'll pick up some other time.
Sounds good. This has been a great discussion, and it's great hearing from you, Valerie, because I think the comment you made is really very valuable insight. And if nobody else has anything else to say, I'll just say that for me, again, my yarmulke is off to Rabbi Kahn. I thank him very much for being here tonight. And I thank all of you for participating in this discussion. And it is great to see your dad and your mom online. Thank you, everybody, and keep in touch. And we hope to see you soon.
thank you. Thank you, Zegazon.